I've been told that people seem to think that I love to hear myself talk. And it is very true. I do love to hear myself talk. They'll never get me to admit it, but I do. And now we're going to get into a pretty heady one. And this will be the last one, and we'll see where this goes. But it is from Sydney Watson. I like watching Sydney Watson. She's pretty good in my opinion. I think she's got a pretty decent opinion to at least listen to. I think it's pretty palatable. And I know that UK viewers probably don't know much about what's been going on in the sense of Don Lemon, but he's recently been in a little bit of hot water with some of the activities that he's participated in. So let's see if Don Lemon is going to prison.
Nobody.
Which I think he probably won't, but
nobody's above the law.
You heard what some of the folks said in there, that this is...
So a little bit of context. He was embedded with a group of protesters who went into a church and disrupted the church services. So with that context, he was trying to say that he wasn't part of the protest, but the protesters came out and said that he was in fact part of the protest, and he's being hit with a specific law that states you're not allowed to go onto church grounds to protest. Unless invited.
They shouldn't be there, and they shouldn't be uncomfortable, and this is our house and whatever. That's what protesting is about, is to make people uncomfortable.
Nobody is above the law, Lemony boy, or so I'm told. Hi, my name is Sydney. Welcome back to hell. So I know that at this point everybody is completely burned out on politics.
Yes,
and all of you
we are all burned out on it.
And honestly, I don't blame you. It's been a weird start to the year here on our hell gondola.
Get used to it though, because it's going to be nothing but continuing for the next
all of that fatigue
year, 2 years.
Don Lemon, the former CNN host, has been arrested as of today for his participation in storming a church in Minnesota.
So at my direction, earlier this morning, federal agents arrested Don Lemon, Tyrene Jeans. That was the Tyrene Jeans Cruz. That was the woman who invited him, I think. Georgia Font and Jamal Lindell Lindy in connection with the coordinated attack on city churches in St. Paul, Minnesota. More details soon.
On January 18, 2026. When I say he was arrested as of today, I mean, as I'm reporting this to you, he's been arrested, but the arrest happened on Thursday. So it's Friday right now. Never mind, leave me alone. No,
this is like a week or two ago, as of this time.
Nobody is above the law.
Now, to catch you up if you didn't hear about this, anti-ICE protesters went into the city's church in St. Paul, Minnesota during a Sunday service on, like I said, January 18, 2020.
Which is a federal law, by the way. That is ubiquitous for the United States, not just for Minnesota. That is ubiquitous for the United States that you are not allowed to disrupt services because they are considered protected.
They disrupted the service by chanting anti-ICE slogans, calling for justice for Renee Good. They confronted attendees and the pastor.
As far as I'm aware.
The protesters targeted the church because they believed that one of the pastors was connected to the St. Paul ICE field office in one way or another.
Which, that's insane on its face, by the way.
So, I don't think they know what to do. I'm sure they probably called the local authorities right now, and they'll show up in a bit, but so far no one has been hurt. People are just really angry and upset, and members of the church are trying to get them to calm down. But this is the beginning of what's going to happen here.
Renee Good! Renee Good! Renee Good!
All of this is obviously very, very well-adjusted behavior.
Very well-adjusted behavior.
It's a wonder that progressives don't have more support. Now, Don Lemon, who used to work at CNN, he was
fired.
There, but
that's
has
right.
Since become independent and reports on YouTube and whatnot.
He says that he left. He was most certainly fired.
He's basically a me at this point. He acted as if he was part of these church protests in a journalistic capacity. Were you though, Donnie? Were you? I remain unconvinced.
I mean, he was a journalist though, so I'm going to be completely fair. I'm willing to believe that he was, or I'm willing to believe that he thought he was. I think that's fine. However, he still was part of it and was named by the people as being part of the protest. That's where the issue
and
comes
said
from.
that the people involved were resistance protesters. That was the language that he used. He said that they were there to surprise people, to catch them off guard, and to hold them to account. For what? We don't know.
Diverse community. If you see this, when we first pulled up, we're like, wait a minute, which operation are we at? And as it turns out, because we were like, well, this is kind of MAGA coded, right? Saw the American flag over, but these are resistance protesters. They're planning an operation that we're going to follow.
Having the flag of America as MAGA coded? That's very interesting, Don. Please continue.
I can't tell you exactly what they're doing, but it's called Operation Pull Up. And it's Takima Armstrong, and she has been doing this since George Floyd, Dante Wright, and others, where they surprise people, catch them off guard, and hold them to account.
It should also be noted that during this little pre-church raid chat, Lemony Snicket utilizes the word "we," which indicates, at least to me, that he is associating himself with the group and its goals.
Sure, but that could be a slip of the tongue. Like, let's be 100% fair here. People make mistakes in words all the time. I do that all the time. He could be using a different interpretation of the word "we," like royal versus regular usage. You can't really use that against somebody.
Which, if you're Lemony's lawyer, is a really unfortunate event. I am really bringing you all those highbrow literary jokes today. Literary, that is a challenging word to say. Words are hard for me tonight. So, following along with these people, Lemon Boy ended up at the center of this church protest, sticking his little microphone in the face of the pastor of this church, and honestly being incredibly rude to him.
What do you think of this?
I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful.
It is.
It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship. So.
It's also illegal.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
okay, but listen, we live in there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
No, that is not correct. The Constitution states that you have a right to peaceably assemble. You do not have a right to protest. Don't let anybody else tell you that that is what the case is, because that's not the case. You have the right to freedom of speech, and you have the right to peaceably assemble. You do not have the right enumerated by the Constitution to protest. If your protest is peaceable assembly, then you have the right to that. But you do not have a right to interrupt other gatherings.
We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
So that in and of its face is wrong.
We're here to worship.
Don't push me, he says. Okay.
That's why we're here.
Lemon also questioned the church members, and the video that I'm about to show you of that honestly made me really sad. He narrated the scene as it unfolded and filmed everything for all of us to see.
I'm a Christian here that wants
By the way, I'm sure that this did wonders to make people go to his side.
to praise the Lord with my son, and now I gotta go home. I'm sorry that you guys are so angry.
I'm going to bet you that about 90% of this church probably voted in the same way as Don Lemon voted. And I'm sure he's probably taking that number down to 50%.
I'm just chronicling. I'm not with the group.
Oh, what do I have to say?
Can you understand why they're angry?
I don't understand any of this because I'm a simple man. I'm a simple man
Yep.
who loves the Lord and is a good father.
I just wanna
This
go
is
to
what we
church and
look
raise my
forward to, is
kids.
coming, being with our family and praising Jesus, and that's not something that we have to run away from. So this is kind of a bad day for us.
Do you understand that some of these folks feel voiceless?
I don't understand because right now I'm so upset right now.
But don't you think until we go to heaven, if you believe in that there should be some sort of peace here on earth and that people should have agency and we shouldn't be beating people up off the street?
Yeah, let's just go ahead and weaponize your religion against you to somebody who obviously doesn't want to talk about it, who doesn't care, and will just show up every 4 years to vote. And that's the extent of his political involvement. Forcing him to have this be his business is definitely a political strategy. I don't know how it'll play for you.
And we should be abiding by the Constitution?
I think that's just a little bit loaded for me right now. What you're doing.
Why so?
Well, I don't want to interview right now.
Yeah, I just want to go home.
Worse on this planet than feeling distressed and having Don Lemon ask you racially charged questions. What do the people in the church have to do with any of this? You know, my psycho hair and I were just sitting here editing this video, and I couldn't help but think, I bet these church people would have wanted to be invisible to Don Lemon the same way that all of us want to be invisible to our Mr. FBI man.
Is this an incogni?
Which is why today's video is sponsored by Surfshark, and I worked really hard on this one, and it's weird, and you better watch it.
Okay.
You know I can hear you breathing. No, you can't. Well, I definitely hear you talking, so where are you and what are you doing? I miss looking at your browsing history. Well, that is creepy.
Let me be fair, if you think that they can't look at you through a VPN, then you are very mistaken.
My only entertainment. I am certain, actually, that there are plenty of other citizens that you can stalk, Mr. FBI man. It's just not the same. Since you got Surfshark VPN, I'm always in the dark. Well, as a matter of fact, I kind of enjoy you being in the dark. Well, I don't. This virtual private network.
Yeah, how am I supposed to control you if you don't know, if I don't know what you're searching?
To spy on you anymore. And you get to access geo-blocked websites and content, and you can access servers in different countries that let you browse for.
Although I will be fair, there are a few shows that you can watch with VPN. I know I wanted to watch the Don't Hug Me I'm Scared on Channel 4, which is a British program, and I had to use a VPN to be in Britain in order to watch it. That's why I use Tor.
Cool. Because
Tor has its own issues, but definitely a little bit more safe. I definitely think, like, I don't use Tor only because I'm too stupid to have figured it out.
Even get things like Surfshark Alert,
and it's more like I'm too stupid to have downloaded it.
Data breaches take place that
Plus, I don't really do anything that I really care that the government sees, so.
Ad-free browsing. Is this what you want? You want me to go? Well, I'll go. But I'll never stop loving you. So
at least right now.
You are finally ready to vanquish your FBI.
I don't know. We'll see where I'm at in a decade. I might have to use it.
Or go to surfshark.com/Sydney. And don't forget to use code Sydney at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN.
4 extra months.
Do it today. Say
hot
no,
diggity dog.
Mr. FBI man.
Yeah, it was.
Why am I weird?
It was 100% an exclusive when it came out.
In the confrontations, while others, including Lemon himself, have said that he was there solely in a journalistic capacity and not as a participant.
Oh, no. Okay. So Don't Hug Me I'm Scared, sorry to have a quick tangent. Don't Hug Me I'm Scared actually got released as its own standalone, like, 8-episode miniseries on Channel 4. So there's actually a legitimate TV show that they worked on for years that was put on the television. So if you haven't seen it, because it's not just a web series anymore, they took the web series, the premise of the web series, and made a new show from it. It was actually pretty good, in my opinion. I'd suggest watching it. It's just as delightfully creepy as the original with a lot more production value. Sorry, let's get back to the video, though.
Solely in a journalistic capacity and not as a participant. Now, obviously, and not surprisingly, this entire event drew a ton of criticism because going into a church, or really, I guess, any place of worship, is a giant no-no to a lot of people. Even as a non-believer myself, I have found all of this to be super disrespectful and very much not okay. And I don't want to get into why all of that is. I think it's
they did. They actually put it on TV.
But I guess the acceleration of anti-Christian rhetoric here in the United States, it's actually really starting to annoy even me. And that's a big deal because for a really long time, I was very indifferent to most of this. Now I'm just like,
I will say that regardless of how you feel about religion, regardless of how you feel about Christians, I think that you should be allowing them a space to worship being unaccosted. Because if you extend that to every religion, I think that's fair. And Christians shouldn't be in a, a super category above or below anybody else. They should be held to the same standard as everybody else. And I don't see them doing this to Buddhist temples. I don't see them doing this to mosques. We should be protecting Christians as a religious entity as much as we're protecting any other religious entity. And it's ridiculous that, we hold them to a different standard. It's kind of weird how people put them in a different category.
Like, hey, let's not do this anymore, okay? Leave the Christians alone. They are one of the nicer groups who are not trying to stone you to death.
Leave all peaceable religions alone, I think is probably the best takeaway from that.
Civil Rights Division of the DOJ announced an investigation into this event. And then nothing happened. And honestly, guys, I really didn't think that anything would. It was like this event transpired, Don Lemon participated.
Hit him with the nothing
there
ever
was a lot of
happens.
noise about it, and then I thought there would just be a whole lot of nothing. And this is probably due to the fact that I am used to being sad and disappointed. I am
Well, there still
unfortunately
probably
used to
will
the
be
crazies
nothing,
winning
because
and
as
then
far as I'm
finally
aware, he's
silent.
being
But then,
charged.
to my shock and awe and surprise, they actually went ahead and nabbed Don Lemon. They got him.
It's because they're the most populous in the United States. Yeah, it is because they're most populous in the United States, which makes them obviously an easy target. But if you're going to have freedom of religion, you got to be able to not separate them just because they're the most populous. It either has to be ubiquitous law that everybody is treated under the same way, or every religion is okay being, accosted and interrupted. Like this is a some or nothing type of argument, because if it is some people can be placed in other categories than other people, you have a different tiered justice system, which is just flies in the face of the way that Western legal system is created. And I honestly think that it's probably the most fair that if you're going to extend religious protections, you extend it to all religious groups, again, provided that they are a peaceable religious, section, which means that they're not actively going out of their way to foment or preach violence. And, if people have a problem with that standard, that's fine. You can have a problem with that standard, but if you're going to make a religious exemption for one group, you have to make it for all groups. At least that's, I think, legally logical.
By federal agents in LA while he was covering the Grammy Awards. He was arrested.
Yes, he got
along with
arrested
4
at
other
the
people,
Grammys.
although in the indictment there's more than 4 other people listed, so there is that. According to the indictment, Lemon Drop has been charged.
Yeah. Again, I think he's going to get indicted, but I think that it's probably nothing's going to come from the indictment. It's the point of them willing to indict them that is sending the message to Don Lemon, I think.
With 2 felonies, count 1 being conspiracy against the right of religious freedom at a place of worship.
And again, I'm not entirely sold that he should be, charged to the fullest extent. I think the indictment is probably correct because a grand jury would have had to have, reviewed the indictment. But I think that he's probably going to be told, like, hey, technically they indicted you, so they thought there was some there, but now looking at it, there was nothing criminal that you did. Don't embed yourself with protesters who are naming you as a co-conspirator. I think that's fair.
Relates to the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, also known as FACE, which prohibits interference with religious worship, among other things. The wording for this second count
that was done in
relates to
1994, by the way. That was
intimidating,
ran underneath the Clinton administration.
and interfering with the exercise of right of religious freedom
Clinton?
at a place
94?
of worship. Lemon's attorney,
Wait,
whose name
am I dumb? Yeah, that would have been Clinton, because Clinton would have been elected in 92, because he came out of the election in 2000, so yeah, it would have been during Clinton one.
Actually not super sure how to pronounce because it's spelled A-B-B-E, which I think is Abby. Must be Abby Lowell, anyway, is her name. She said that this is a free speech issue because Don Lemon was simply acting as a journalist in this capacity. I mean, he kept telling us that he was just there to chronicle, so what else would he have been doing?
I'm just chronicling. I'm not with the group.
Again, as with anything like this, a lot of people out there have a lot of opinions, and so far, there has already been a ton of misinformation and confusion and wonky reporting on all of this, and also responses from all the regular players about.
Remember, a lie travels halfway around the world before the truth can put on its boots. It's a very good idiom to adhere your life to.
How this is an infringement on civil liberties. CNN released its own statement saying that the FBI's arrest of their former colleague raises profoundly concerning questions about press freedom and the First Amendment. The Department of Justice has already...
Again, I think that this all really hinges on how this is litigated, if it even goes into litigation. Because once it starts going into criminal litigation, that's when we're going to really start seeing some challenges, I think, to constitutionality, which I think could be good challenges and I think could be bad challenges. Because I can see this going both ways, where the First Amendment might get narrowed if they argue in a way going against it. And I can see that it can get, in a way, more enumerated and broadened if they argue in a separate direction. So it's going to be interesting if it does go to litigation, which I don't think it will, especially because I think a higher court's going to look at that and be, I don't want to cause a constitutional crisis, so I'm just going to say dismissed with prejudice.
Failed twice to get
Which is
an
fair.
arrest warrant
I
for
wouldn't
Gunn
want to
and
do that if I
several
were a
other
judge.
journalists in Minnesota, where a chief judge of the Minnesota Federal District Court found that there was no evidence that there was any criminal behavior involved in this event and this work. It's so weird. The statement is short, but it's
Okay, again, but that's of the Minnesota Federal District Court. This isn't a Minnesota issue. This is a DOJ federal issue. So this is a completely different court. It's got nothing to do with Minnesota. It might be federal court in Minnesota, but it's not Minnesota's call. It's the federal government's call. So it's a little bit of a different tier there.
so annoying to read. It goes on to say that the First
And
Amendment
which
in the United
also is wrong because it said there's no evidence. Well, a grand jury, which is a, grouping of people, would have to make a call on whether or not it's plausible that it is a fact that there was a crime committed. So it's one person against 12 other of his peers saying, no, we think there was a crime. So
States
just to give a
protects
little bit more
journalists
evidence
who bear
there,
witness to
context.
news and events as they unfold,
As far as I'm
ensuring that
aware,
they
I think
can
that's how that
report
works.
freely in the public interest, and the DOJ's attempts to violate those rights are unacceptable, and they will be following the case closely. I will come back to the judge thing and explain that in just a little bit, but it is worth noting, and this really does
At least I
matter,
think there was a grand jury that
Don
would have looked
Lemon
over it.
was
I think that's how that has to
indicted
work,
by
but
a
I could be
grand
talking out of my
jury
ass and
in
just not knowing.
Minnesota. That is what helped bring these charges in and allow them
Oh, there
to
you go.
arrest him. A grand jury in Minnesota, not Texas, not Florida, Minnesota.
Perfect.
This is important again because of the sort of weird political leanings that are going on in Minnesota. What are you guys doing? Like, is everyone just a little bit like wonky up there right now? Like, do you guys need?
As an American, I can speak to the fact that every state has its own quirks. Every state has its own awesome and its own parts of it. A lot of states around Minnesota can definitely say that they look at them kind of like, what the hell are you doing over there?
Some oxygen? Are you too high up? Anyway, then we had Chuck Schumer saying that this arrest is a dark message to journalists
He would.
everywhere.
He definitely
that
would. That sounds like
criticizing
something
the
that he would do.
administration means you have to watch your back.
The administration is behaving no differently from police states and authoritarian regimes across history.
Yes, because authoritarian regimes are typically known for their grand jury indictments. Thank you, Chuck Schumer.
They've arrested a journalist for the crime of doing his job.
Again, thank you, Chuck Schumer, for purposely, lying by omission, saying that a grand jury of his peers elected to say that there is a possible criminal charge in which they decided to hand an indictment over to the federal government. Imagine how that works. I'm sure that authoritarian governments allow the people to decide what's happening.
And let's be very clear. This arrest is not just about one journalist in one incident. The arrest is a dark message to journalists everywhere. If you dare criticize this administration, watch your back.
Yes, it is a message to journalists everywhere, but it's not a message telling them to watch their back. It's a message telling them, listen, you can no longer become part of a protest without facing consequences by being in-kind actors.
I really do find these responses
strange how that
ironic and
works.
honestly sort of funny in like a depressing way, because I have been on YouTube for quite a long time. I have been participating in the independent media space for quite a long time. And I know that all of us here on this platform, and again, a lot of independent journalists, have been subjected to the years of genuine censorship, like mass amounts of censorship during, I guess, the latter years of the first Trump administration, but also the Biden administration. So when liberals...
Which is true. If you think that people weren't being censored, then you're naive. Lots of people were censored throughout history. We'll just say that. But typically, more right-leaning voices, especially centrist right-leaning voices, were very heavily censored because the people who were censoring them, whether or not they disagreed or agreed with them, they were making rules that the right side, or rather the right side right of center, didn't agree with on principle, which then they used to censor and persecute them in perpetuity. And what I'm trying to say by that is they made the rules, and then they could change the rules to benefit them and censor other opinions with really little work to go into it, which makes sense in how one would make a platform. That's just how it is. So I could see how that might not be, I would say, that people might not want to hear that, but that's just a fact of what happened.
And Democrats and whatnot talk about this. I know they don't care. I know they don't actually care about people being able to have their say, and I know they don't actually care about journalistic integrity. So it's always just a little bit of a when they do this stuff. It's obvious, but they really only do care because it concerns somebody who is ideologically aligned with them. But
I think both sides do that, though, to be fair.
In 2026, everything's partisan. All of
Yeah.
the time.
Everything's partisan. I think only people really care when it affects their side, and I think that's an issue because nobody actually cares when it affects the other side. Everybody tries to co-opt a good, problem for their side and not recognize the externalities that it's going to cause for the other side. And I think that's on purpose because people always see things very much in 2D terms without really much thought towards anything else. And I really hope that we can get to a world where both sides can agree, like, we don't want to do this for either side. This would be a good thing. And that's why it's like, I don't want to see a journalist on either side of the aisle being part of a protest group that's interrupting church services. I don't think that's controversial. I think that any reasonable human being would look at that and go, yeah, I don't want to see a journalist interrupting any church service or any other type of religious service, again, as long as they are a peaceable religious service, for any reason, because you shouldn't be. I think that's reasonable.
Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, whose website, just by the way, looks like it was made by a teenager on crack, also released a statement regarding Lemon's arrest, calling it a disgraceful affront to the First Amendment, as if you guys care about that, and a corrupt weaponization of the criminal justice system. Jeffries frames the arrest as the Trump admin.
Again, which is interesting because it was a jury of his peers that elected to indict him.
All of these people are so annoying. On the other hand, one of the reported worshippers who was there in the church that day said that Don Lemon was absolutely part of the protest and he shouldn't have been there at all.
Don't listen to him.
Of him talking
yeah,
about,
don't listen to this guy. He was just a witness.
The young people who are exiting the sanctuary and saying how they're traumatized, they're disturbed, and that's what's necessary in a protest like this. And I think that's just disgusting. I think that we as Christians are never promised peace or comfortability in this life. We know that people will be against us, but that does not mean that we shouldn't call people out.
The church itself.
Also, by the way, Don Lemon was caught saying that exact phrase on camera at the beginning of the video.
And its pastor, or head pastor, I guess, weighed in as well as of hearing about this arrest, presumably, and it said that they are grateful that the Department of Justice acted swiftly to protect City's church so that they can continue to faithfully live out the church's mission to worship Jesus and make him known. And because I really do think it matters, I just want to quickly roll us back around to CNN's initial comments about the magistrate judge in this case. The DOJ essentially asked a higher court, being the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, that's hard to say, for emergency help obtaining
okay, so I guess they did ask a higher court.
Warrant for Don Lemon and 4 other people's arrests. The DOJ wanted the appeals court to force a lower federal judge in Minnesota to issue those arrest warrants.
That's interesting. So a grand jury indicted him, and then a lower court judge said no. So then they went to an appellate court to make the appellate court force an arrest. So the judge was legislating from the bench. Interesting how that worked out.
This judge, who people are saying is an activist judge, had already said no, claiming that there wasn't enough evidence of a crime to justify arresting them right away. I've put a letter on screen from this judge so that you can pause to read it if you want to see what this guy has to say, and then you can weigh for yourselves if you think he's a leftist activist or not. However, when the appeals court, who just by the way is made up of 3 judges in this specific case, said that they were not going to step in here.
So now, by the way, the score is 15-1. Because a jury is 12 people and 3 more would be 15.
One of those judges involved.
And in order to make a grand jury indictment, the jury, I believe, has to be unanimous.
involved in this decision wrote a separate note agreeing that the emergency request should be denied, but he added that he personally thought that the government's paperwork showed enough probable cause to support all 5 warrants. The appeals
Interesting.
court made it clear that while they were not going to override the decision of the lower court and the lower court judge, the DOJ did have other avenues available to them to obtain the arrest that they wanted.
That's
Hence
why it's
the grand
federal.
jury being utilized here and all the things that we're
Got
talking
it.
about now. Look, we've come full circle.
Okay, so I guess I was wrong then. It was a judge was asked to issue the warrant. He said no. There was an appeal. They said no, but but there is enough government paperwork to say that they can pursue other means of arresting him, and then a grand jury indicted him. Okay. It's still kind of funny because they admitted then in the appellate court ruling that there is something there that he probably could be arrested and indicted for, but we're going to uphold this because we don't want to immediately press it, but the federal government can press this. Interesting how that worked out. That's a very strange series of events, isn't it?
Now, I actually really haven't had enough time to think about this and to download it and to tell you whether or not I think this is actually a free speech issue or not. And while
I think a lot of people are of that
obviously think
opinion.
that it is completely unacceptable to harass and attack people in their place of worship, it really does boil down to the question of whether Don Lemon specifically was in this church and
Well, again, as of 1994, it is illegal to do that.
and participating like this in a journalistic capacity or not. As an aside, and I do actually think this is important, before the church event took place, there is a clip circulating where Don Lemon said that he's turned his camera away from the protesters because they were sharing critical information about their plans, and presumably he didn't want to have that on live stream or on video or whatever. And to me, you know, that doesn't exactly scream
That's a little
trustworthy
weird.
journalism. Like, not to mention the way he talks about everything is like he's directly involved in
You would
it. And
think
obviously,
you would think that if he were actually there in a journalistic capacity, he would have shown it because, you know, you're documenting it, and they would have been, you know, obviously understanding that he's a journalist, or they would have forced him away. Interesting how that works, but still not 100% good at, you know, evidence.
Looks for this reason.
But it points in a direction, which is the problem.
It may look like MAGA coded, but there's a reason they have so many white people here. I'm just going to be honest. It's because of the operation that they're doing.
MAGA coded is white people. Thank you, Don Lemon. Quote
Today.
for
It's important
2026.
to have allies, as they said, white allies here. So that is what I
You know,
can
of course, never mind the fact that he had a historic turnout amongst African Americans and amongst Mexican Americans, or rather, I guess, Central American voters. Funny how that works.
I turned our camera off of them because they're giving some critical information here.
I would like to know why you are protecting these people, because if you are there as a reporter, wouldn't you want to report as much information
A neutral
as you can?
observer.
Not shield people from potential information that might be useful to them as viewers and as audiences? Donnie boy? Anyway, for all the people who have been moaning and groaning about how this is some sort of attack on journalistic liberties, I think it's worth noting that situations like this have absolutely played out in the past, but towards people and journalists on the right wing. And the same people who are currently crying about Don Lemon so clearly had absolutely nothing to say about cases concerning people on the right wing. So,
could you show us some of them?
Once again, probably not. For example, a journalist
perfect.
employed by a right-wing outlet called The Blaze, whose name, the journalist, is Steve Baker, was covering the January 6th event while it happened at the Capitol. He was inside the Capitol filming the people who were in there as well and reporting on the events as they unfolded. Now, naturally, Baker was exposing the event in a way that Democrats didn't like and the Biden administration didn't like, and he was ordered by the FBI to appear at a Dallas field office in shorts and flip-flops, where he would face charges. What charges,
Interesting.
you may ask? No one knew because the charges were sealed. Now, instead of showing up in that way, because
That's interesting that the charges were sealed. Usually they don't do that.
That seems like a humiliation trap. Baker showed up in a suit and deprived the Democrats of the optics they likely wanted, and it was here that, according to him, he was led around in chains cuffed to his wrists and ankles. After he handed himself into the police, he said that even people in the court who were there for felonies were treated better than he was.
And just also for more information on that, usually they don't have you in chains and handcuffs unless you're like some type of excess risk. Which is, again, why did they do that? I don't know. I wasn't there. But it points in a direction.
Just by the way, he was charged with 4 non-violent misdemeanors.
I probably don't have a lot to say right now.
You most certainly are not put in handcuffs and chains if you're charged with a misdemeanor.
I need to process for a little while. I'm actually still shaking a little bit. I don't like what I just went through. I don't like the deliberate humiliation that they put me through. There was no reason to do that. There was no reason to march me into a courtroom in leg chains today. There was somebody there answering for a felony, and they weren't in chains. My charges are misdemeanors. It's just, it's mind-boggling. But that is, unfortunately, the type of selective persecution that January 6th defendants are facing.
Similarly to Don
And like, I can speak to that a little bit. There was definitely a lot of excess persecution for people who were part of J6, especially having been, you know, on the ground there for a little bit and seeing what had happened there. There were a lot of, you know, people who probably deserved it. There were a lot of people who probably didn't deserve it. And they just ubiquitously ran through people just universally. Like, it was insane to see the aftermath of that when I was watching on, you know, television and social media with what was happening, because I was like, there's no way that they're, you know, putting these people under so much legal scrutiny as they are. It was insane to me.
Who is very, very clearly showing that he agrees with what is happening during this Minnesota church event. Baker similarly said that he approved of what happened during January 6th. Whether this refers to the protests or the break into the Capitol, I don't know, and I can't say. But the bottom line is that he filmed inside the Capitol.
Which, you know, if he meant that he was okay with people breaking into the Capitol, like, come on, man. Nobody's okay with that. Like, period, nobody is okay with people having broken into the Capitol. However, I happen to think that there was a lot more federal involvement with that than they like to admit, but I'm never going to know the answer to that in my lifetime. 100%.
And did journalism in the Capitol for over 30 minutes, and this was enough 4 years later to ask him.
Wait, it was 4 years later?
And then manacle him and perp walk him.
That's insane.
Reasons. Where was everybody's concern about free speech then? Chuck Schumer, where were you? Hakeem Jeffries? What were you all doing? There are actually a bunch of situations that unfolded during the Biden administration's time in power that refer to the FACE Act and had people charged and serving jail time under the FACE Act. Like, I'm sure some of you remember, there was a situation that took place in 2021 where a group of pro-life protesters sat outside an abortion clinic and sang hymns and tried to counsel women who were there and trying to go into the clinic. The protesters,
which, as far as I'm aware, isn't illegal. Wait, it is if it's actually abortion clinics, I believe, fall under the FACE Act. Actually, I think that might be illegal.
Were inside an office building where the clinic was, but blocked access to the clinic's front door.
Yeah, that's definitely illegal.
And this was the illegal part, just by the way.
Yep.
A year later, in October,
can't do that. Makes sense.
The Biden administration's DOJ indicted 11 individuals involved in that protest, and as of 2024, several of them received prison time and/or house arrest and/or probation. Now, obviously, this is not remotely an apples-to-apples comparison. I'm not saying that it is.
Yep, it is under the FACE Act. Yep.
Here that the FACE
I believe that it actually specifically enumerates abortion clinics.
Act has been used and is used against people
in addition to religious
environments
places.
Where some people would probably argue that it is a free speech issue, while others will argue that you can't block people from accessing private businesses and private pieces of property. I really don't want to get into the weeds on all of this and if it's moral or immoral or sort of make any commentary about any of that, but I do want to demonstrate that usually also...
Right. Strictly factually, things are factually as they are. You can argue about the morality, you can argue about the legality, you know, every day that you want, but leave that up to a public debate forum morality, again, what factually is the case is more what we're interested in right now.
What feeds into somebody's perception of these issues is quite clearly how they swing politically. So rolling all of this back around to Lemony Boy,
And it does in fact swing in a direction, at least as a matter of observable fact, is from my perspective.
I think that worshippers should be able to go into their church and exercise their First Amendment right to worship in peace.
Yep.
But one really cannot counteract or cancel out the other. And I think that in the midst of all of this sort of political posturing and arguing and who's being targeted and who's not, this aspect, and it is an important aspect, really gets lost in this conversation. So many media outlets and politicians and other journalists are sprinting to defend Lemony Snicket's claim about the First Amendment, but none are acknowledging that his rights and the rights of protesters cannot impede the rights of churchgoers. It's also quite difficult.
I'm pretty sure that that also is enumerated in our legal system, but a lot of people don't really see that because I think it's enumerated in logical precedent, but it's not enumerated distinctly.
To Lemon to claim that he was just documenting when he was justifying the protesters' disruptive presence in the church.
By the way, you look at this guy who's like yelling at them. Like, come on, man. You're going into a church and just yelling at churchgoers over your political like leaning or your political stance. What are you doing? Like, on its face, come on, man.
Conducting this so-called interview with the pastor. While filming in his car about the protests, Lemon said that these protests should make people uncomfortable. I also have already showed you that clip where he helped conceal information by moving his cameras away while supposedly documenting events. And during other interviews that are outside of these events and after this church situation, he made it clear how much he dislikes white Christians, which again, it's not like an indictment on its own, but it just sort of feeds into this idea that
that's crazy if he actually said that, actually.
Kind of a bad faith actor. He also has a history of
I wish he had played the clip so I could have heard that.
Even advising people to get guns. So, do with that what you will.
Black people, brown people of all stripes, whether you're an Indian American or a Mexican American or whoever you are, go out in your place where you live and get a gun legally, get a license to carry legally. Because when you have people knocking on your door and taking you away without due process as a citizen, isn't that what the Second Amendment was written for?
I also think
that's very interesting that he would say that, just on its face, by the way.
Being honest, this journalistic integrity
and the fact that he lumps African Americans in with Indian Americans and every other person who has any amount of color in their skin together as one block is also very interesting because I'm sure they all have the same racial identity groups. Interesting how he lumps them all together.
It sort of starts to crumble as more and more information comes to light. According to legal documents here, Lemon allegedly physically blocked the main door of the church while confronting congregants with immigration policy factoids.
That's the illegal part. If he did that, period, that is face act justification right there. If he actually did that and you got him on camera dead to rights, all right, guess you're going to be prosecuted because you can't do that.
Like the clip I showed you. If I did have a sleep paralysis demon, it would in fact be Don Lemon reciting immigration facts to me while I'm trapped in a building. And it isn't super surprising that we ended up here. About a week ago, legal analyst Stacy Schneider, that poor woman, oh my god, I bet she got bullied in high school. Schneider, what a fun name. Appeared on a CNN segment explaining how protesters entering the church do indeed violate the FACE Act. Is that even right English? What is this? What am I even saying today?
What does the law say about protesting in a church like this?
Yeah, the law says that these protesters are in trouble. There's a federal statute.
Finally, somebody with sense in the room.
That says
like,
if
you can agree or disagree with the FACE Act. That doesn't matter. What we're talking about right now is whether or not the law says something. The law says this. It is a candid fact of reality that you cannot do this legally speaking. If you don't like that, go change the law.
Fear or physically obstruct.
But I hate to tell you, 90% of Americans probably agree with that law.
Their religion, it is a federal crime. Now, had these protesters stood outside the church, been on the sidewalk, been on the street, they likely would have been protected by their First
Yep.
Amendment right to protest.
Absolutely.
But you're allowed to protest in a public forum, but that right is not absolute. They crossed the line when they went inside a church, and I think of it almost like, a church is public property. Imagine if protesters went inside a hospital to protest Medicaid or health policy and interrupted
I didn't know that
patients.
churches are considered public property.
The most frustrating part of this
That's
entire
interesting.
situation and
I didn't think that they
conversation
were.
is how everything about it is already being distorted. This is not just a situation where a journalist is documenting events that they are witnessing in a neutral way. Lemon was directly involved, encouraging the operation, justifying the actions of other protesters.
Honestly, the fact that he went up and started interviewing the pastor is just insane to me. Like, how, honestly, how stupid do you gotta be to be like, oh, we're in the middle of a protest, let me go ahead and interview the person being protested against? Like, have some common sense. If you're a neutral observer, you should just be there neutrally observing.
Referring to this as a resistance operation. He lumped himself into it by saying, we will do this and we will do that.
Again,
it's not really
him saying
a
we could be
surprise
for
that
any
this is all
reason.
being spun
Not
as
really
an
good
attack
evidence, in my
on the
opinion.
press as a whole, but boy, is it disappointing to see the media yet again proving how incapable they are of real journalism. As of recording this video, Lemon Toes has been let out of prison without bail, because I guess he's not a flight risk. And
Which
was
makes
very
sense.
smug in
He'd be
court,
released on his own
and,
recognizance.
ultimately, why wouldn't he be? This is going to get him a ton
Again, I think the
of
charges are probably
media
going to be
coverage
dismissed against him,
and
unfortunately.
sympathy, and people are going to go
Which
out of their way to support
I say unfortunately because I believe he probably did violate the FACE Act by the letter of the law. However, it probably isn't in the best interest of, public perception or the public in general to actively pursue prosecution. No, churches are public in the sense a store is, but they're privately owned and they have unique carve out and taxes that preserves it. That's why I was saying I was surprised that they were public spaces, because they kind of exist in between this barrier of public and private, especially because I would say probably 90% of the time churches would be considered private property, because you can't just enter a church when it's, well, you might be able to enter a church if it's off hours, but for the most part, people aren't expected to. So I don't know. I'm surprised they're not considered private entities, but I can understand why they are.
him, because this is the partisan world that we live in. And although I am quite right-wing, or I guess moderate,
yeah, and whether or not you want, again, I think that's probably a good thing. Whether or not you think that Don Lemon should be prosecuted for this and the degree to which the prosecution exists is very dependent on whether or not you vote left or right, which is sad.
This is something that I just absolutely hate about our culture. It's like nothing can be right or wrong. Everything has to be politically
Right and left.
bent, and everybody has to perceive it in a certain way that fits with their tribe. And I think that it encourages the behavior that we saw from Don Lemon in the first place. Ultimately, I think I need to sit on this and think about it a little bit further, because normally I would like to tell you what I think the end result should be in this case, but I actually don't think that I know enough at this juncture.
People confused
really
open to the public with being public as in
However,
publicly owned.
I
I probably, yeah.
way to see that he was arrested, or at least that there was some sort of
Well, I mean, not only that, but,
to these poor
a grand jury did as well, so.
to them. So I don't know, I'm going to take the win on that. In the end, though, I am very interested to see that action was taken here at all. And going forward, I am very curious to see what the net effect of all of this will be. Now, on that note, and before I open the floor to all of you, this is just a reminder, check out Surfshark using the link in the description. If you are in the market for a new VPN, I cannot recommend them enough. They're honestly also
I'm too stupid to use a
people behind
VPN.
the scenes too, which makes a big difference. Now I open the floor to all of you. What do you all think? Do you think that Lemony Snicket should have been arrested? Do you think that he was in fact part of the protesters and not just a journalist? Are you on the other side of this issue where you think that this sets a kind of terrible precedent and that
Can I be on both?
just reporting the news as it unfolded and he was not involved at all? Are you somewhere in the middle where you can kind of see both sides of this issue, but you're not quite certain where you land on it? Maybe you need more information. situation. What do you think of the counts? Do you think that they're fair? Do you think that they're unfair? What do you think about the treatment of other journalists over the years who have also had the book thrown at them over similar kinds of situations? Fair, unfair, unreasonable? Where do you land on all of this? And what do you generally think of this issue overall? As always, if you have made it this far in the video, congratulations. I always like having you along for the full ride. If you're new here and you're not subscribed already,
We like
and
you,
you'd like to see
Sydney.
more of me and more of this kind of content, feel free to subscribe to the channel. That wasn't right. Feel free to subscribe to the channel as well as leaving this video a like and a comment.
Boom,
I do
we
read
hit
the
you with a
majority
like.
of them, and I like hearing your feedback. As I always
Gotta
say,
remember to
I
do
hope
that.
you wonderful little chickadee people stay safe and well and make wonderful choices, make good choices, and I will see your little schmoodle poodle flower faces in the next video.
You want to know the second definition
All right.
of
No, I don't want to hear that. We already heard that. Well, again, I think my entire opinion of that is going to be, on the one hand, by the letter of the law, yes, I definitely think he should be arrested because I think he violated the law, especially with the blocking the place of entrance. By the spirit of the law, I'm not as convinced, only in the sense that I think there's a reasonable doubt that he was there as a journalist. Because I think the reasonable doubt is, I think he's an idiot. And because he's an idiot, I have doubts to say that he actually wanted to be part of the protest, and he might have actually believed that he was there on a journalistic capacity. And I also do believe that other journalists have been treated worse for lesser crimes. So I don't know. I want to say that there is a definitive in this case, but unfortunately, this is one of those legal gray areas that is going to leave a lot of people unhappy. And again, I think it's going to definitely change a lot of the ways that, or at least it could change a lot of the ways that we view the First Amendment, which I don't know. It could be for the better. It could be for the worst. I'm hoping that it's for the better, but I fear that it would be for the worst. So I don't know how I would want to pursue this. But yeah, no, I guess that's definitely interesting. I think there's probably going to be a lot more arrests coming down for journalists in the future if he does get charged. And, well, he got charged. He's indicted. If he gets convicted of something, one of the counts. And I'm afraid that this will be used as a precedent for other journalists in the future. So I hope that doesn't happen. But, we'll see where it lands. Hopefully it lands in a place where we're better off. I fear that will not.